Hi, I'm Arlene White, and I want to welcome you to this week's edition of the Global Gateway. When you want to do business in the U.S., when you're looking for different services in the U.S., when you want to expand and see what new connections and partnerships you can make in the U.S., you need the help of professionals. And one of those professionals is with me today. Rosanna Berardi, who is the managing partner of Berardi Immigration Law, is going to tell you about the unique things that she can offer and making your life simpler in making sure you get the right services you need. We're going to take a quick station break. When we come back, I'll introduce Rosanna. Go with it. Okay. Rosanna, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to see you. I don't get to see you as often as I would like because I know how busy you are and how busy I am. But I'm so glad. Yeah, no, this is great. Now, what I would like people to know first is a little bit of your own background, please, because you've come from a diverse cross-border understanding right at the border background.
I've been involved in immigration law since 1993. I started my career actually with the former Immigration and Naturalization Service. I started working for them while I was in college, and through my ranks there, I had spent 5 years with the Immigration Service, right at the Peace Bridge as an inspector, at the Rainbow Bridge. I've been to all the bridges as an officer, inspecting vehicles coming through, headed to the United States. I continued my career with them as I progressed my education, and I ultimately worked for the Immigration Office in New York City as a trial attorney where I prosecuted illegal aliens who were in the United States. So I really spent 5 years in many different capacities with the federal government, which laid a wonderful foundation for the balance of my career.
So what made you come back to Buffalo, and what made you start your own law firm?
Well, I came back to Buffalo after doing a year in the New York City office, primarily for family reasons, and there weren't any positions available in the Buffalo office, so regrettably I left the federal service, but it actually worked out perfectly. I went from the federal government actually to the University of Buffalo, where I was their immigration lawyer, where I was helping their foreign faculty and students come to the U.S. and get work permits. So that was really interesting because the international population at the University of Buffalo is incredible. There's 10% of the population is international, so that was really interesting. And then from there I actually went to the largest law firm in Buffalo where I did focus on corporate immigration law. So my background's really unique because I did government, university, corporate immigration, and then finally said, okay, this is time to roll out Berardi immigration law, which has always been a dream of mine.
So it was.
Yeah, it really was. I had seen it from many different angles and decided, okay, this is what I want to do with it. And I formed my firm back in 2005. We were almost 7 years old. Started it with just me, and now I have a staff of over 10.
Oh my gosh,
so we've grown leaps and bounds, and it's been a phenomenal ride.
So let's talk about what you've seen and the changes that you've seen in this cross-border region. So again, kind of setting the tone for the kind of work you do and maybe how that's evolved as well since you started.
Yeah, there's been dramatic changes in the last 15 years. When I was with the federal government, back in the late 90s, it was a very casual, friendly atmosphere. Where are you going? What are you bringing in? Have a nice day. No one was really checking identification. Today, the technology involved in crossing the border is just amazing. The amount of information that the government has totally changed the landscape at the border. While some people may still consider it a friendly experience, I can definitely say the tone is much more different. And what I like to point out too is the agency used to be called the Immigration and Naturalization Service. There was a service component. The new name is now Customs and Border Protection. So we've gone from service to protection. And I think anyone that crosses the border frequently can really pick up on that difference.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But as you say, the technological advances have been phenomenal, especially as we all know since September 11th. So in terms of why you do what you do, how did that evolve? Because again, as you say, you've done corporate, you've done students, you've done individuals. Why did you choose to do this the way that you're doing it? And let's talk about what you do and who you do it for.
Well, I decided to roll out my own practice because I really wanted to be in control of who I represented and how I represented them. There's a lot of immigration lawyers, located throughout the world that practice U.S. immigration law. What really makes us different is that we are very friendly law firm. I'm very approachable in terms of dealing with clients. Many of my clients are friends and we form, friendly relationships.
I can relate to that. Yes.
Because lawyers get a bad rap. Sometimes lawyers are pegged as not so pleasant and difficult and just interested in the bottom line. And I think I have the most fascinating job because I really am able to help people achieve their goals, especially an individual who's got a fantastic offer in the U.S., who's a Canadian citizen. I'm able to help that person get into the U.S. and really start their life again in the United States. And we talk about this concept of the American dream and are we a melting pot? And I believe what I do, we certainly are still American dream focused. People still want to come to the U.S., open businesses, and have new opportunities.
Right. Yeah.
So at my practice, we represent a lot of individuals, lots of Canadians, given our proximity to the border, who have job offers to come to the United States to work. We're instrumental in getting all of their paperwork completed, actually taking the client to the border.
Right.
I'm at the Peace Bridge at least 2 or 3 times a week presenting applications to Customs and Border Protection. I always joke that I'm like the furniture there. They know me. Hey, how you doing? And then we also help corporations that are in Canada and say to us, look, we're really successful in Canada, but only 3% of our sales are Canadian based. Everything else is coming from the US. We need to be in the United States.
Right.
And those are actually my favorite types of cases because to shepherd a business through the process of setting up a corporation in the US, opening an office, getting a staff, and having their key executives be transferred back and forth is really interesting and it's exciting.
Yeah.
We represent so many different businesses that we learn more about who they are and what they do, and then we get to see them on the U.S. side where the marketplace is just so much larger that they really take off and businesses become very, very successful.
So what percentage of your business would be corporate versus working with individuals?
I'd probably say we're probably at like a 60-40 split, 60 individuals, 40 corporate.
Yeah.
I like both equally. The human nature element of all this is really what drives me, and that people just want to do the right thing. They want to be able to have a great opportunity and a good experience at the border. And I can attest, I'm sure you can support me on this, that when you don't show up prepared, it can become catastrophic very quickly, and it's hard to clean that up.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really hard.
Yeah, and again, once you work with all the folks at the border, it is much easier to understand because, again, I forget how many divisions the guys at Customs and Border Protection are actually responsible for.
Right.
So again, it isn't just a simple fact of why are they giving me a hard time.
Right.
I'm just an individual person that wants to go shopping or travel for the day. They're dealing with so many different things. So again, once you understand that better. So let me put this to you. Why would I come to you rather than try to go through those documents myself?
Well, we like to say in the world of YouTube and do-it-yourself, do not try and do immigration yourself. The immigration law is probably one of the most complex bodies of law. There have been people that have said the only thing that's more complex is the Internal Revenue Service tax code. Yeah. It's very complicated, lots of nuances, and even though we can all go on Google and type in, a search term and it comes up, oh, you do this, this, and this, the danger of the internet is that it doesn't take into account the law, the nuances of the law, and the agency. There are certain things that I know when I go to the Peace Bridge they expect to see.
Right.
And I know that based on my experience. You as a do-it-yourselfer would never know that. And if you show up there without that critical piece, your application could be denied. So we encourage people, it's the same as doing your taxes. You could try and do it yourself, or you can hire an accountant that really understands the deductions and the nuances and such. So we encourage people to hire us because we can help you cross the border with confidence. I've done this and only this for the last 15 years of my career. And I'm at that border, like I said, like one of the chairs there. I know exactly what's going on, and my team really understands the procedural aspects of each case.
And I can vouch for the fact that having worked cross-border now for 7 years ourselves as an organization, those existing rules and regulations can change on an ongoing basis. And you're absolutely right. It isn't always written down someplace that, oh, by the way, make sure you've got something extra. So again, if you're new at this game especially, or I would say setting up a corporation, you want to make sure that you get it right the first time.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, the immigration law itself has not really changed in many years. But what the government does, because it's so complex to change the law, is they'll backdoor it by implementing new policies. So all of a sudden, a policy will come into play. We have no public notice of it.
Yeah.
We just hear about it, and we'll hear about it, and we're very good because of the volume of cases that we handle in spotting trends.
Yeah.
So a few years ago, one fact pattern would have no issues at the border. Now today, if somebody says to me, oh, we have an individual that's coming to the U.S. regularly, he's got some direct reports in the U.S., that's all been changed. And not really officially, but it's critical to know what the policies are that are being implemented.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick station break. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the types of businesses, of course, maintaining confidentiality, but some of the cases that you've dealt with so that people can understand how wide-ranging your services are. Okay, we'll be right back.
In June of 1813, Laura Secord overheard the secret plans of the American soldiers in occupation.
If you raise your sword against Fitzgibbon, Upper Canada will be broken.
How many men can we muster?
500 infantry, battery of artillery, my dragoons. Fitzgibbon can't manage more than 50 men, small band of natives. Not a serious resistance if you're equal to the enterprise.
Pursue the advance 2 days hence.
Take me to Fitzgibbon. Laura Secord delivered her message to the Canadian troops. The Kahnawake Mohawks forced the surrender of 500 Yankee soldiers, and the American invasion was stopped.
Now, Rosanna, before we took the break, I asked if you would describe some of the different types of circumstances, situations that you deal with. And again, I'll try to pinpoint it a little bit better for you from a student perspective, because we know there are a lot of Canadian students that do cross the border on a daily basis. From an individual's perspective, that as you alluded to earlier, there's people that get hires and contracts in the States. How do I deal with that as an individual? And then from a corporate perspective. And I guess one of the things that makes me laugh when people talk to me is, oh, I just found out I need to do this. Or, yeah, I found out 3 or 4 months ago and I need to do it now because it's starting next week.
Right.
So let's talk about those types of circumstances and the lead time you need, but also some of the key things that people need to think about.
Okay, well, with respect to international students, if you ever cross the border, any border around August, you will see a large influx of many, many students in their flip-flops waiting to get their paperwork processed. That area of law has gotten a lot more complex since 9/11. The Department of Homeland Security actually created a new agency, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, that handles all of the student visa work in the U.S. But it's critical for students to make sure that they're properly enrolled in a U.S. school. They've got full-time course study set up for them, and then when they're there at the border, they actually have to show that they have finances to pay for the tuition.
Oh, wow.
So they used to have a letter from a bank or from a certified accountant saying we have X amount of dollars to pay for tuition at Duville College or what have you.
Right.
So we can provide some counseling with respect to what do you need when you're actually there, what are they looking for, when is the best time to go, when's the best time to avoid it. There's key days to definitely stay away from the border.
Right.
And one of those is actually coming up next week on Good Friday. I recommend that no one goes there. It's going to be an absolute zoo. So for students, we can really help them figure out that they have the right documents. In terms of individuals, we get calls a lot from individuals in 2 capacities. The first is that they'll be looking for jobs in the U.S. They will say, okay, I've reached my peak in Canada. I need to go to a bigger marketplace. One of the things we do for them is we help them, when they look for their jobs, we can look at the job and say, this will qualify under NAFTA, or nope, this will not at all. So it really helps them drill down their job search, because many times we get calls from people that put the cart before the horse and say, I've accepted this fabulous position in New York City, so I need my work permit. And when we look at what the law allows us to do, sometimes certain jobs don't transfer into a work permit. So I will have to say, I'm sorry, there's no way we can bring you in. And that person spent all the time interviewing,
Wow.
negotiating, accepting an offer, only to be told by me, I don't know how we're going to bring you in. I don't see a way.
And the companies don't necessarily tell you any of that during the interview process.
No, and it's difficult because if you have an employer that's not really familiar with hiring foreign nationals, they think, oh, I'll just give you an offer letter and you'll be good to go. And it just isn't like that at the border anymore.
Okay.
So for individuals, we work with them in actually looking for jobs. And then once they do have, I mean, I don't find them jobs, I just tell them if it will work from an immigration perspective. Right. Then once they do find an offer, we'll be instrumental in preparing all the documentation regarding the application to submit to Customs and Border Protection. We'll prepare the package, the supporting evidence. We will talk to the applicant about the tone and the level of questioning that will occur at the border. And then I actually go with the client to the border.
So you prep the person
Oh,
personally?
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
I just go back to my immigration days and I know the questions that are asked. Because we're there so often, I can often predict, okay, here's 2 spots in your application that they may focus on.
Yeah.
These are the 2 weaker links of the application. So the client doesn't walk in there completely blind. They will say, oh, okay, well, I've read my application. I know how to answer these questions.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of that work, and that's always really fun because the client, once the work permit's issued, is just so happy that they're on their way, to a new career and a new life in the U.S.
Now, can you just take a step back and explain the work permit? Because this is not a green card.
Right.
This is not a visa.
Right.
This is a work permit.
Right. For Canadian citizens, there's a special benefit available under the NAFTA treaty. NAFTA treaty is between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, and it consists of a schedule of occupations. There's about 75 of them. And if you have a job offer in one of those jobs that are listed on the NAFTA treaty, such as teacher, accountant, lawyer, management consultant, if you have any of those types of jobs offered to you, we can use the NAFTA treaty as a mechanism to bring you in under a work permit. A work permit is permission from Customs and Border Protection to work in the U.S. It's not a visa. Canadians are visa exempt. A visa is something that's issued by the U.S. Department of State that goes in your passport.
Right.
Canadians, 99% of the time, are visa exempt. So when you're applying at the border for a work permit, it's simply a determination by Customs and Border Protection that you qualify under the law to work in the United States.
Right. Okay. And then from a corporate perspective, taking that individual, someone comes to you and says, okay, I want to set up my U.S. address and people to work here. How different is that from what you do with individuals?
Well, there's a separate immigration category called the L1. That's for intra-company transfers that allows a Canadian business or any foreign business throughout the world that's been in business for at least 1 year to set up an affiliated company in the United States. So oftentimes we're approached by Canadian companies, all different sizes, small, medium, large.
That's what we are actually. Yes.
Who say, okay, now's the time. We really need to be in the U.S. All of our work is there. We need to have a U.S. presence. Some of their clients demand a Made in the USA sticker on the product.
Yeah.
So we will work with them and identify what type of corporation needs to be set up. We'll set it up for them. They will need to obtain office space. They need to put together a comprehensive business plan showing exactly what they're going to do. And then if you're a Canadian citizen, we can make that application right at the border. So oftentimes I walk in with these very thick, extensive packages that have business information about the Canadian company and the new U.S. office.
Yeah.
And we're able to transfer key executives and people with what's called specialized knowledge, which is an intimate understanding of the product, into the U.S. for specific periods of time.
What is the maximum?
Maximum amount of time for managers or executives is 7 years. The maximum amount of time for people of specialized knowledge is 5 years.
So what happens after that if you're continuing on?
If you're continuing on and you are a manager or executive, there's 2 things you can do. The first is if you can show you're in the U.S. less than 183 days per year, the government will give you 2-year extensions indefinitely. But we really need to show that your home base is Canada and you're just coming in intermittently. Or during that 7-year period of time, if the U.S. company is successful, we can flip you over to a green card. Green card is different in that it is a permanent benefit issued by the Immigration Service. The work permits like the TN or the L1 max out after a certain number of years. The green card is the ability to live and work in the U.S. forever.
Okay. And I'm sure there's a lot of different steps and hoops that have to be jumped through.
Yes, very complex area. incredibly difficult. And, you know, like I said before, the law's not really changed, but the economic conditions in the U.S. in the last 3 years have significantly influenced the policy with respect to issuing work permits and green cards.
Okay, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I want you to go into that a little bit further,
Sure.
that it's not just a matter of simple work, but the other conditions around it. We'll be right back.
Years ago, two nations were changed forever.
Men and women, American, Canadian, British, First Nations, and Native American, fought for country, home, and culture.
Discover1812.com brings their struggle to life with amazing stories of sacrifice and courage.
Commemorate 1,000 days of war.
And celebrate 200 years of peace. Discover1812.com.
We all say we care about the environment, but it's our actions that show how we really feel. And it's the simple actions that make a difference. We can choose to recycle or keep throwing things away. When your rechargeable batteries or cell phones are no longer useful, recycle them. Help make a difference.
Now, before we took our break, you talked about the economic conditions. We already know that things have changed dramatically at the border over the past 15 years, and there's a lot of new things going on and new technology and a lot of people in different responsibility positions. But let's talk about the economy and what that's done and how we deal with our cross-border trade now, because you must live and breathe this on a daily basis with the clients that you work with.
Definitely. And as I stated before, the law's not changed, but certainly when there's 10% of U.S. citizens unemployed, which in our country is 30 million people,
right,
it definitely has an impact when I'm presenting an application on behalf of a Canadian citizen to work as an accountant in New York City. You know, oftentimes we hear under their breaths from the customs officers, well, why can't an American do this? What's so great about this Canadian?
Right.
So we always have to be careful and counsel our clients that, you know, it's not a personal attack on you, it's not a legal requirement, but certainly point out what makes you exceptional for this position. And the reality is a lot of U.S. companies would love to hire U.S. citizens, and even though there's 30 million people unemployed, there are huge gaps in certain skill sets, particularly in the technology area, in sciences and engineering. There just aren't enough U.S. citizen employees in those fields of study
right,
to fill all the positions. So we hear it, we try to address it up front, and you know, sometimes we just have to let it roll off of our skin because there's not a lot we can do.
Yeah, well, and you know from my own experiences that there's always challenges, and you can't just assume that everything is going to be simple and easy every time you go back to get your
Right.
renewals either, because as you said, if something changes, it does change the overall atmosphere and the environment for a lot of different reasons. So
Yes, and
I
you
think go ahead.
also have to realize that when the Department of Homeland Security was created after 9/11, they had increased the number of personnel at the border by threefold. So you have a lot of new officers
Right.
who are not trained in these complex areas. So while last year when you went to apply for your work permit, it was really pleasant and easy and it took you 10 minutes, this time around you may have an officer that isn't really sure what this is all about or really knows and has detected an error. I mean, there's tons of errors that happen every day. We have clients who will hold work permits for 10 or 15 years and all of a sudden they're told, sorry, we're not going to issue this year.
That's got to be devastating.
It absolutely is, because people are in the middle of their lives, careers, families, and all of a sudden they're stranded in Canada. Even though that's your home country, if you haven't lived there for a decade, a lot has changed.
Yeah.
So we always take a fresh look at every application. We never assume this is going to be a slam dunk. We're constantly in there looking at strategically what could be a problem or a landmine.
Okay. And you alluded to the fact that when you're working with someone, you bring those providers of the other complementary services to them as well. Do you want to just touch on that quickly?
Yes, we are a full-service immigration law firm, and when companies need to incorporate in the United States, we can certainly do that component of it. If there are any criminal issues with respect to, is this going to be a problem for entering the country, we can certainly look at that. What I love the most about immigration is that it consists of all these different areas of law: corporate, criminal, international, family. So there's a little bit of everything, but we can totally analyze a case, you know, from a 360-degree perspective.
Wow, that's a lot. You've grown so quickly. So
We sure have.
what are the next steps?
Well, next steps, we hope the U.S. economy continues to improve, and we really hope that the relationship between the U.S. and Canada stays as friendly and as peaceful as it is. We don't see anything that points to otherwise.
Are you seeing more Canadian trade into the U.S.?
Absolutely. There's been a huge uptick in the last, I'd say, 12 to 18 months. And I'm not even sure if the economy has actually improved. I think the fear of coming to the U.S. is kind of
Abated?
tapering. Yeah.
Well, that's good, because again, I mean, we've heard it from Prime Minister Harper in Canada, we've heard it from President Obama. They both have export growth on the radar. They're pushing for those things, and as each other's biggest trading partner, how can you ignore that right in front of you, especially in our cross-border region?
For sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm very glad that you're here at the border helping, because I know how many times you've helped us and your advice has been extremely valuable. I just didn't realize how diversified everything had become for you and how quickly you've grown. So that's got to be very, very exciting for you.
Yes, absolutely. We are very proud of where we have been and where we're going. And, you know, no matter what, I will always focus on client service. That's the biggest portion of what we do. There's lots of lawyers out there. There's healthy competition, but really it's a relationship issue. And we forge really strong, positive relationships with our clients. They call us, they email us. We are responsive, and we are very experienced in this area. We are not a firm that says, oh, we can do this and we really don't know what we're doing. We truly live and breathe this, and this is the only area that we practice. We don't dive into anything else.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today, and you'll definitely be coming back to give updates as we go forward.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Rosanna. If you've enjoyed this show and you'd like to make some comments, you can email me at btaglobalgateway@gmail.com or go to our website, www.btaglobalgateway.com. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us for this week's show, and we'll see you next week.